Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker.
And me, DB Fastbinder. We're doing something a little different this week.
Yeah, because well, the news has been a little slow, so we kind of wanted to come up with some good topics of discussion for everybody. So I think we've got something really fun lined up here. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I hadn't really considered what effect the writer's strike would have on our news flow, but it does feel like lots of stuff has been announced. Though part of that might also be people taking enormous write downs on things because they realize that they've produced too much.
yeah, I think that's a lot of it. Yeah.
But you also have the perspective when you think about it.
You're still muted.
You also have the issue when you think about it that if you're in a contract war with the writer, you don't necessarily want to announce the big thing because you're giving them a negotiating room. Like, hey,
Mhm.
you uh, you're saying that I'm only worth X an hour, but you just said that the movie I wrote for you is the linchpin of your new cinematic universe. What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, so with it being a slow news day, we're just going to have sort of an informal discussion. We've thought about what it's basically just a question of why are there certain franchises that burrow deep into us, and what's kept us around for some and not around for others.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that'll be a yeah, like I said, a fun topic of discussion. Of course, we have another kind of interesting thing we'll get into another topic, and then of course if with every show we start off with our thing of the week. This is some particular media we've been consuming, and of course this week we have the same thing. And then we move on to box office and DEG, and then get into the rest of the show. And Our thing of the week it was at my suggestion. It's a little different than what we normally watch, and but um, as Chris Gore likes to say, it's good to have a balanced media diet, and
Yes, indeed.
yeah. So we watched What Lies Beneath. Uh, this is from 2000, so it's a fairly old movie. Stars Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer, directed by Robert Zemeckis, which was this is a bit of a surprise. This isn't something he normally does. Uh,
Yeah, this movie in general has a lot of weird combinations because, you, I don't think of DreamWorks as being a live action company anymore, but it was made by DreamWorks.
yeah,
It's a Fox movie, but it's streaming um, on the Max,
the Max. Yeah,
which I think that some of the stuff that's come out, like I think Avatar 2 streamed on HBO Max.
right. Yeah, and it's also on Disney Plus.
Right.
So it's
It makes me wonder if Fox had some sort of pre-existing streaming contract with Warner Brothers that carried over after the Disney purchase, because like Free Guy went up on HBO Max, and so did some of the other Fox newbies.
Yeah, and Paramount too. I've noticed quite a few Paramount stuff on there. Like I think all of the Star Trek every Star Trek movie 1 through 10 I think is on Paramount or is on Max.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's interesting.
What tangled webs we weave.
Yeah, yeah.
Before we get into the actual movie, so I haven't been an HBO Max subscriber for a while, but I decided to re-up to the Max just to give it a try out. The app is functionally identical, which means that unfortunately, just like the previous version, I had to stop to buffer 4 times in the course of the movie.
Uh,
Now I have pretty decent internet, and that never happens with Hulu or Netflix or has it happened
mm,
with Paramount? No, I don't think it's happened with Paramount. So I
yeah.
And I remember that happening a lot. Like when my friends and I were remote watching Godzilla versus Kong, I kept having to pause.
Uh, and yeah, it's I haven't had that issue, but there have been times, yeah, it has been a little buggy, and obviously they still need to work through those bugs with this new app. It's yeah,
Which is weird because it's just the old app with a new coat of paint.
pretty much, yeah. And I'm using the same account from HBO Max, and it picked up right where I left off with over there. So it's weird. Yeah.
The nicest thing I'll say is that I signed up for the cheapy ad-supported version, and they did not show me an ad before this. So that's decent of them at least.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good of them.
All right, so we've talked about the plate long enough. Let's talk about the meal.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. So, what lies beneath is about it's it. Well, I should say it's a ghost story movie, ghost story drama,
Or is it?
or is it? Yeah, murder mystery. Although most ghost stories are murder mysteries. Like there's an old movie called the Changeling with George C. Scott, kind of similar vibe with this, which actually takes place in your neck of the woods, right up in Seattle.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
But anyway, back to this movie. It's This movie's about a couple, middle-aged couple, played by the aforementioned Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer, the Spencers, Norman and Claire.
mhm.
And it starts off with them taking Claire's daughter and Norman's stepdaughter off to college. So now they are empty nesters, and they things start happening around the house. That Claire gets kind of wrapped up in. So one of the things with any movie like this is you have red herrings,
Mhm.
and uh, one of the red, and I should say the red herring is of course with um,
Before we get into this too far, do we want to do like a non-spoiler take and then go into spoilers, or do you think
uh,
anybody who's wants to hear this 25-year-old movie discussed is probably okay with spoilers?
um, that's a good question because yeah, like you said, this movie is yeah like almost 25 years old, but at the same time, it's like it's kind of obscure, and people really there probably are a few people who haven't seen it, and there is a twist at the end. Um, so I guess keep it. We'll
Uh,
do like non-spoiler, and then we'll give a spoiler warning, and then yeah,
okay.
yeah,
All right. So non-spoiler.
yeah.
So Michelle Pfeiffer, what Norma was it?
Claire.
Claire, that's right. Norman. See, I am
Normal,
so
yeah.
bad with character names.
It's all right.
But it's interesting because the initial setup is it does a very good job making you question if she's just insane
Yeah,
because her only daughter has just gone off to college. They've recently moved to a new area, this big house in this rich neighborhood by the lake,
yeah,
and she has a husband who is incredibly busy with his work.
yeah,
So it's like you get some like empty nest, some isolation, some desperation. Her only friend is this kooky wine-aunt, basically,
yeah. Pretty much, yeah, yeah,
before the term was made.
yeah. Yeah, and so she has a lot of free time on her hands, which is kind of a big part of it. And you also find out that she was a musician, a cellist,
Mhm.
and she gave that up when she got married.
Right. And the- for the non-spoiler aspect of it, they do a pretty good job layering up the mystery as they go.
Right.
At first it's like, okay, you think that one thing is going on, and then it's like, oh, that couldn't possibly be the case because you can't murder a live person.
Right. Yeah.
I will say one of my favorite moments in the movie is when she goes to see her therapist, and the therapist is saying, "Now I know that many people go resist going to therapy because they're worried I'm going to say that they're crazy. Don't worry, I have to wait at least 3 visits before I can do that."
Yeah.
That was a joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like for a non-spoiler broad strokes thing, I'd say this is a worthwhile movie in a genre I don't often expose myself to, because it's
Yeah.
very much like a Rear Window mixed with suburban housewife empty nest desolation.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I would agree. Yeah, and it has and it there's definitely like you say, you're the entire time you're watching it, you're questioning whether or not what she's experiencing is real,
Hmm.
or yeah, if she's losing her mind, or yeah, it kind of runs the gambit.
Yeah, it's so I would say since it is just on streaming, if you have a service that provides it, give it a watch.
Yeah.
It's 2 hours well spent.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
All right. So if you stumbled across this separate review and don't want to know what happens, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I was not expecting Harrison Ford to actually be a villain.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't either.
Like that's very much playing against type because I can't think of a single movie I've seen where he was just outright the villain.
Yeah, I can't think of any either. And I think that plays well. It plays into the storytelling, and I would say he was perfectly cast, because
Hmm.
it makes the twist work, because you wouldn't expect him to be a bad guy.
Yeah, like you think that the worst he is that he's um, uncaring,
Yeah,
very self-involved.
yeah, he's very and dismissive, and he's
Hmm.
I would also say very insecure.
Hmm.
You kind of notice that in various parts of the movie, especially when they bring up his father.
Hmm.
It's he's kind of like, because I guess his father was like a well-known
Mathematician,
mathematician, right? And so he's kind of feels like he's living in his father's shadow.
right? He's like a genetic scientist.
Yeah.
The movie's also good at leaving you a nice little like setting up Chekhov's guns.
Hmm. It's still muted.
Actually, are they good if they're blatantly obvious and I noticed them like immediately? Like Daniel could tell you that. Harrison Ford's character works in a genetics lab,
Mhm.
and they're talking about how they have this chemical that, oh yeah, it'll paralyze a mammal for about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. It was a pretty obvious. Yeah, like you said, I don't wouldn't necessarily call it a good one, because it was kind of glaringly obvious. Yeah.
They call that lamp shading, and this was like a street lights lampshade.
Yeah.
Um, now, I alluded to this earlier. Yeah, it would count as a spoiler, but she initially thinks that her new neighbor has killed his wife.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This was the red herring that I was alluding to earlier.
Yeah, like there's and they do a good job of faking you out with it because they present the neighbor as being an asshole,
Mhm.
and the wife is being like acting terrified and nervous.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole scene in there where Michelle Pfeiffer's talking to her through the fence, and yeah, and the
Right.
setup of it is really good. Because you don't see her face. You only like see her eye, and yeah,
Or a mouth, and
yeah, yeah,
so, so yeah, so it's very disconcerting, and also you know they have the wine aunt mention that she comes by with the welcome basket with a bottle of wine and a couple
Hmm.
of goodies, and she's rear windowing through through their window, watching him hold it, like he has the basket. He's tossing aside the card and the other stuff, and he takes a bottle, tosses the basket aside, and starts drinking straight from it.
Yeah.
And the wife hasn't been seen for a bit, but then then the red herring is exposed as she confronts him with Harrison Ford acting desperate and or embarrassed, and like, "You killed your wife. Tell us." And then the wife walks up.
Yeah. What are you talking about? She's right here.
To quote the Simpsons episode, after Principal Skinner explained why Bart hadn't killed him in court, uh,
Yeah.
Your Honor, I demand that man's testimony be stricken from the record. Denied.
Denied. Yeah. Or or Homer, like we still haven't figured, with
Oh, with
Ned
Mayor
Flanders,
Quimby's
like
nephew.
we still haven't solved the mystery of the whereabouts of your wife. I'm right here. Oh, I see.
Because everything's
Everything
wrapped
fits
up in a
into a
nice,
nice.
neat little package. So, uh, and they also have a few other swerves. Harrison Ford appears to try to commit, or no, it's like a question if he tried to commit suicide or if they just happened to have the mistake of having the hair dryer plugged in while he was trying to take a bath.
Yeah. Yeah, that part that's the part that I didn't get. Like why he tried to fake that. Was he trying to get sympathy from her?
That seems like a good, that might be one where it's more a swerve for the audience than a choice that makes sense in character.
Yeah.
Like he did intentionally, like he did mention later he did do that intentionally just to maybe he was trying to throw her off the trail, like, because
Yeah.
so I think we could talk about what actually happened. Um,
Yeah.
so I think what actually happened is that he had at some point had an affair with one of his students,
Right.
and he, I do not believe, did she kill herself, or
No, he killed her.
he did actually kill her?
Yeah,
Okay,
he killed her. Yeah.
okay, yeah, killed her. Then I think he drove her car into the lake,
Right.
which is why
Yeah.
the ghost kept appearing in the lake.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and he buried her like whatever that chest thing was with all of her things in it.
Right, like because earlier on she found um, a a key for a little box,
Right.
like an old school jewelry box.
Yeah.
So that was kind of intriguing. So that was like a nice little bit of like, yeah, hmm, actually I don't know if that's a nice little bit of misdirection. More like it's a neat detail, I guess is the
Yeah.
way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course that was the whole thing was the student went missing, and I'm trying to remember how. Oh, that's right. She that's the spirit that's haunting her,
Right, it
or
is the student.
is the student. Yeah, and so Michelle Pfeiffer does some digging and then finds out where she meets her mom and
Hmm.
finds out more about her, and then she finds the lock of her hair,
Hmm.
and she takes the lock of her hair with her to the house, and then she gets possessed by the dead girl.
Right. That was this. That was see that makes something click for me. Is that like the scene where she was being super amorous with him,
Yeah,
and then suddenly said something. Don't let your wife find out.
yeah,
And then he freaks out and knocks her to the ground.
yeah. Well, and I don't know if you noticed, but it was kind of like a split second, but her face changed.
No, I missed that.
Yeah, it was really quick, but yeah,
Okay.
it changed to the dead girl's face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Uh,
uh, yeah.
so yeah. So and you also wonder if Harrison was like sterile or something, because he basically, like, the daughter was not his,
Right.
and he had married her as a single mother and had been caring for the two of them all these years. So you wonder if part of his psychological stuff was, not being cuckolded, but you know what I mean. It's like having to raise somebody else's kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that had a lot to do with it. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Ninja, it's good to see you. So she's a Two Face? No, I don't think that's quite right.
So, so yeah, that's basically the mystery of it. He uses the magical so a motif in this movie is the bathtub. It's
Yeah.
just like like the water is constantly a source of danger.
Hmm.
So like his way of dealing with her is to use the magical paralyzing liquid and then filling up the bathtub with water. It's
Right.
very tense scene as she's like sitting there completely unable to move.
Yeah. And she slowly gains control of her extremities. Like she can kind of move her fingers, and she kind of wiggle her toes, and yeah, it's yeah, and you pointed this out when we were talking about it, uh, that his reaction when she's in the tub, and then all of a sudden their dog comes in, and he's like, "Oh, hey."
Hey boy, I want to go for a walk. And like the dog is clearly worried or something, but
Yeah, it's like like that yeah, that's the moment when he crossed into the realm of evil.
well, at the very least, it made you. It was like there to it was like there to underline. No, this is the final twist.
Yeah.
He's dag nasty evil.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's a tale of supernatural revenge mixed with a thriller. Michelle Pfeiffer really does a great job of carrying this movie because I notice we keep giving Harrison the top billing, but that really is backwards.
Yeah, this is Michelle Pfeiffer's movie. Yeah, she has the most screen time. It revolves mostly around her character. Of course, this being Hollywood, especially in the 2000s,
Mhm.
Harrison Ford was the more bankable star, and
Right.
so he got top billing and more than likely got paid more.
Yeah. Though it worked out. I looked up this movie on the numbers just on a whim, and it made a quarter billion in its original box office run.
That's really good for a movie like this, and back then, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of makes you appreciate just everyone talks about the death of the mid-budget movie. Although I think actually no, I don't think this was mid-budget for the time. Uh,
No, it was like 90 million, I think. It had a pretty good price tag on it. I think most of that
yeah, I
was
think it was 90, 100.
yeah, I think most of that was Ford and Pfeiffer's pay.
Most likely. Yeah, 90 million.
Yeah.
Actually, nearly 300 million at the time. So, yeah, this was well received. This was a I should say no. I think this movie was probably well received.
Yeah. Of course, the other thing too is it came like I said, it came out in 2000. Uh, what movie came out the year before?
Harrison Ford movie or
No, no, uh, supernatural horror movie.
Blair Witch? No. Look, it is not my genre. I'm sorry. I'm never going to
Uh,
guess this.
I was thinking of The Sixth Sense.
Oh, yeah. So that was like, yeah, I guess that was the it thing at the time.
Yeah, yeah, because in that movie did really well. And anytime you have a genre movie that makes a lot of money,
Hmm.
studios are just gonna be like, we need to do our own
Yeah.
genre movie with that. Yeah,
Although if that was the inspiration, it's way less of a blatant copycat than a lot of Hollywood productions. So good on them
yeah,
there.
yeah. I would agree. Yeah. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend this movie.
Yeah, I mean,
If
like
you,
we can poke little holes in it here and there.
yeah,
And take those as writing lessons for ourselves, not to be quite so blatant with your or with your Chekhov's guns.
yeah, yeah,
But as an actual experience, it was very good. I
yeah.
like you're just comparing it to The Sixth Sense. I feel like The Sixth Sense lies to you.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah.
Like, like I was kind of enjoying ish it until the end, where it's like, oh, and your perceptions are going to tell you that you're like, yes, you have the obvious questions. How did he go for so long without noticing that nobody, like, he wasn't eating anything and nobody was actually talking with him? It's like, oh, your brain will fill in the gaps. Like, oh, screw you, M. Night Shyamalan, ding dong.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't just
What's
if the whole thing is you're supposed to be able to tell from the context that he was dead all along, you can't just hand wave away
yeah.
those details.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, but yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So Daniel, thank you for the suggestion.
yeah, yeah. You're
Are you
welcome.
just gonna watch this on your own, or
Um, yeah, I was gonna watch it on my own.
well, cool? You have a more balanced movie diet than I do.
Uh,
Speaking of, well, frankly, imbalanced movies, let's
yeah,
get to our box office report. I believe a few months back when we did our predictions for the year and talked about the upcoming movies in that one mega stream,
yeah,
I think I was, I think I had questions about how well Spider Verse would do. It's like, well, the first one only opened to $30 million, so I mean, it wasn't that successful overall. Like, yeah, what I was missing was that since then, Miles Morales has been in a Spider-Man game everyone played on PlayStation,
hmm
headlined his own spin-off slash expansion pack, however you want to call it,
yeah,
and people were watching this movie over and over again on Netflix.
yeah,
So, okay, egg on my face. I underestimated this movie. $120 million opening.
yeah. I underestimated it too. Yeah, I didn't think it would. Yeah, I didn't see this coming.
No. According to their friends, the numbers, that's 3.4 times what Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse made at its debut in 2018.
Hmm?
We do talk about movie ticket inflation, but that still is a much bigger actual audience, because I think the average ticket price was like $7 or $8. That's versus like 14 today. That's
Yeah,
you beat inflation.
yeah,
The only thing that's been bigger this year is Super Mario Brothers. It's going to be a wild year if the biggest movies of the year are both animated
yeah, and not Disney.
and not Disney. I mean, Spider Verse like asterisk Disney, but it's a Sony production that they
Yeah,
don't.
yeah,
Um, the only thing that's really seems to be competition at this point is, if the Flash happens to do bigger than everyone's predicting,
hmm
that's a possibility. And of course, the new Mission Impossible movie.
right.
But the year has kind of fired its big shots that anybody gives a damn about.
Yeah,
Which more on that in a minute. So, as is yeah, as is our habit, let's just go take a look at other movies here. Book Club: The Next Chapter is dropped off a frickin' cliff.
yeah. Oof.
584 per theater. Oof.
Yeah,
Let's see. So we go up the list here. Um, About My Father doesn't seem to be doing very good. I think you made the observation last time that De Niro is not in a lot of good movies these days.
yeah, yeah. Oh, and Ninja mentioned points out that Transformers is out this weekend.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how that does.
Yeah,
Let's see. So we got Super Mario Brothers movies still, even though it's on digital, and Daniel even picked it up.
yeah,
At 9 weeks, it's outdid About My Father's second week, so
yeah,
people are still going to see it.
yeah.
Um, Fast X, oh, it did manage to cross 100 million last
Hmm,
weekend, so that's good on it. Let's take a deeper look here. Yeah, 600 million. So far it's wildly outpaced Ant-Man, our perennial
yeah,
punching bag for the year.
yeah. And it does have a little bit of a sperm whale thing going on there.
Yeah, it's not like a completely depressed sperm whale though. It's just like one that's maybe frowning a little bit.
Yeah,
For those who don't know, the sperm whale chart is where you have the numbers big projection range up here, like the upper thick upper jaw of a sperm whale. then you have the trending line way beneath it.
Yeah.
We call it the sperm whale of failure.
Yes.
Although part of this is that China is by far its biggest market, which means that Universal gets less of this back. So
Right.
so
Yeah.
that's it. I mean, it's basically twice of something or half of nothing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah, this is not being huge in the States, but that is okay.
Yeah. And well, I guess over here we don't want to watch movies about family.
I guess not. Wow, $340 million budget. That's got to be that's got to be like the actors at this point.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. You see the size of the cast of these movies is just
Yeah.
what?
Um, as far as other major movies of the weekend, Guardians of the Galaxy is. I can't believe it's already been 5 weeks since it came out. It feels like just yesterday we were reporting on it.
Yeah, it's holding in there.
Yeah, I mean, no, yeah, closing in on 800 million.
Yeah.
And actually, I wonder what is it? Okay, it's also reasonably big in China.
Mm,
So that proves that, like, okay, so I feel like the Chinese market for American movies has cooled down a bit. I think
mhm.
it also helps though that I think they finally uh, s- are letting people actually out of their houses again, more or less, after
Uh,
that extreme COVID lockdown they did last year.
right. Yeah.
It was nuts, man. Like it was like as bad as we thought it was here in 2020, 2021. It was like next level in China for the
Yeah.
lockdowns and
Well.
restrictions.
Yeah. Well. Nobody does authoritarianism better than the Chinese government.
True that. But enough about West Taiwan.
Yes.
So, of course, the big movie of last weekend was The Little Mermaid, which I realize I'm looking at the weekly chart by mistake and not the weekend chart. So
There we
let's
go.
fix that. Yes. So Little Mermaid fell off a cliff, and I kind of was. It's like not quite 60%, but not far off.
Yeah, it didn't fall off as bad as I thought it would. I thought it would be like Ant-Man.
Yeah, I was running some numbers where. So one of the things that makes it annoying if you're looking at it at one of these charts on a day by day basis. Okay, it's actually kind of comfortably in the middle of its projection for the states.
Mm,
Um, but if you look at the day by day box office projections, they'll give you the comparison to last week versus yesterday. And you'll see people who make clickbait YouTube videos will just uncritically look at this number here, like last Friday versus its first Friday. They'll go, you know, Little Mermaid drops off a cliff, 69% drop.
yeah.
And then by the time the weekend actuals come out, if you compare weekend to weekend, it's actually more like 50% or 60%.
Yeah.
So I kind of, so what happens there is that when they're doing, it's like you see this green number up here, this green text, that is the any previews they did on Thursday or the rest of the week. Like it's not considered part of the full release. So that ends
Okay.
up getting rolled into the Friday estimate.
Okay.
Uh, so like while this says, I'm not sure if, yeah, so actually like while this, actually let's pull up the calculator, just make sure I'm not saying nonsense here. 38 plus 30 plus 27. Okay, yeah, that works out. Uh, so that means is that while it says Friday 38 million, the Friday it actually made like 27 and change million
Hmm.
because the Friday number gets these previews from Thursday and possibly earlier in the week lumped in.
Okay.
So that's why you get these really off numbers here. And I was kind of trying to estimate it earlier in the week, and so what I hit upon was if you want to do a well, of course, the real comparison would be to subtract this from this, which I think is actually the better strategy. So let's give that a shot. So,
Okay.
so I'm just going to do round. Actually, no, I'll be precise. 38, 149, 001 minus 10, 3, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. means that it actually made this much on its first Friday, 27,800,000 and change.
Okay.
So then if we go 11, 853, 470, then divide it by the actual Friday amounts. Yeah, that actually predicts it perfectly because 42% of ratio means that if we subtract 1, 57% drop.
Okay.
So, which is exactly what we got here. So it actually is so that's how you properly do that if anybody happens to catch this.
Okay. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right.
In fact, that could be that could be a short.
Yes.
The fine art of avoiding clickbait.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, but anyway, so yeah, this movie is not doing much internationally, and its strength is the states.
Yes. And for whatever reason, yeah, it's not resonating overseas. We kind of talked about that last week. Um,
Yeah. And some people are out there saying, "Oh, these other countries are racist." They refuse to go see a spin-off movie featuring an African American version of a beloved character. That was
yeah.
awful
Yeah.
racist. Disney didn't do anything wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
wait, Spider-Man across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. Hmm.
There's a flaw in your theory. So, like we said before, this one took us a bit off guard because we were not expecting quite this performance.
No, we weren't. Yeah.
Interestingly, this one is also lopsided in favor of the states. Now that I look at it,
Oh yeah, it is.
wonder if there are any movies that okay, China 22 million so far, but that's comparing one weekend versus multiples for the others, so it's in line.
Yeah.
Um, wonder if yeah, it has not dropped in Japan yet.
Poland, South
So
Africa, South Korea.
yeah, Japan it tends to be like a very large box office market. South Korea kind of secondarily.
Yeah.
So that might juice the international box office number back in line.
Hmm.
However, they don't really have much to worry about because unlike Little Mermaid, which was made for 250 million, this movie had a budget of 100 million.
Yeah.
Even if you assume that they doubled the budget to market this thing, which they might have, because I think this thing had a Super Bowl ad,
Yeah, I think it. Oh yeah, I think it did. Yeah.
and I've been seeing signs of promotion for it around. Um, we'd only be looking at a $400 million break even point, roughly speaking,
Yeah.
which this movie is well on its way to achieving.
Yes. And maybe even eking out a profit.
Yeah, I mean, at this rate, depending on what it does during the week and its drop this weekend in the face of Transformers, like Transformers could hurt it internationally because like towards the end before they made Bumblebee, they were making those movies specifically for the Chinese market.
Yeah, and yeah, especially the whichever one. I think it was the fourth one. Like the entire third act is in Hong Kong.
Yeah, the Mark Wahlberg one.
Yeah. Could you be any more obvious that you're pandering to them?
Yeah, yeah, man, they're just a bunch of pander bears over there. Anyway,
Yeah.
anyway, um, so it'll be interesting to see how this shapes up. I think we talked about this last week. Talked about Little Mermaid. Is that there's something about uh, movies starring African Americans that seems to like weight it towards performance in the U.S. And I don't know if that's like a factor of international audiences being less interested or domestic audiences being more interested.
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, yeah, it's almost like a. Is that it? Is that no? That wouldn't be a chicken or the egg, wouldn't it?
It's a unknown.
No, yeah, yeah,
Because on the one hand, like it's clearly an audience that is very passionate. Like I remember, I mean, Black Panther had the biggest dom- uh, domestic box office of any of the Marvel movies except for the last two Avengers films, as I recall.
I
And I
think
think it's
that's
just
right.
because they
Yeah.
kept taking church groups. Like there are literal people organizing church groups to go see that movie over and over again.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So, either way, as long as you're making the money, it doesn't necessarily matter where you're making it from, just as long as you keep the budget in control. Because we'd
Right.
be having a very different conversation if this thing had cost 250 to make.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We'd be having the same conversation that we had with Little Mermaid. Yeah.
Right. Because it didn't gross that much more in its first weekend. Well, 30 million at this rate. Okay, significantly more, but not enormously more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, good on them. I'm just from what I've heard, I'm not sure that I would like it, so I'm probably just gonna wait for streaming.
Yeah. I am too.
So, but they have classic Ben Riley over here, so
Yeah.
that's a good
Yeah.
sign.
And Ninja points out. Yeah. Spider-Man 2099.
All right, but he was in the last movie in Face Front. Scarlet Spider. I've always liked Scarlet Spider better.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's you know, uh, I might just be shallow, but a Spider-Man with who shared my name when I was first getting into comics might have just been like too cool to me. Also,
Yeah.
hi Bagman.
Oh yeah.
You know the story of Bagman, right?
uh, Trying to remember.
So Bagman wears a bag on his head in a Fantastic Four uniform because in like the first Alien costume saga, when Peter realized that it was trying to bond with him and was taking him out at night and moving his body around for
Okay.
him,
Yeah.
he went to get help from Reed Richards, and so they managed to get it off of him. But of course, he'd shown up with his alien costume and no other clothes except for his underwear. Uh, so, Human Torch and Spidey always have had this antagonistic relationship. So Torch, gave him a paper bag and a Fantastic Four uniform. And he Spider-Man has to help somebody. He's like, "Hey, are you joining the Fantastic Four? Are you, are you a new member, or are you just a fan? Go away." So he's a fun little Easter egg.
Yeah.
All right. Then as far as that covers the
DE.
box office.
Yeah.
As far as the DEG charts, some things that were interesting to me were, John Wick came in at number one. That's not terribly surprising.
No. Good movie.
Shazam is climbing up the charts, which is mildly surprising. I was kind of almost expecting this thing to die without a trace.
Yeah, and that's also on Max, by the way. So yeah,
Um,
that's a little
I choose not to
interesting
spend
that.
my time that way.
Yeah.
Also, for anybody playing comparison at home, Spider Verse's first weekend matched its entire box office cum.
Oof.
First
Man.
domestic weekend, ignoring international.
Yeah. Jeez.
Creed 3 is climbing up there. Dungeons and Dragons came in with at fourth place, so good on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I really hope that gets a cult status.
Yeah, I don't think that we'd get anything else from it, unfortunately, but at the very least, it's something that people could talk about.
Yeah.
Ant-Man going down because who cares?
Yeah.
Um, Avatar is kind of falling off. This Operation Fortune movie. There's some movies I think might just do well in the DEG charts and stay there longer than you'd think because everybody forgot to see them in the theaters. So they're just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, what's this thing? Oh, a Jason
Yeah.
Statham Guy Ritchie movie?
Yeah.
How did I miss that? Cocaine Bear, Jesus Revolution, which is firmly on the will watch at some point list.
Yeah, same here.
Oh
Plane.
yeah, Holy Ninja points out that I forgot to mention the kick me sign that is on Bagman's back. And I should say, it's it's like a very macho guys playing with each other type relationship where they like prank
Yeah,
each other.
yeah,
Unsurprisingly, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 1's 3D release is up there.
Hmm. Yeah. Everybody going back to watch it
Yeah.
or rewatch it.
Puss in Boots is fading away, but you know it's been 7 months on here, so it's gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Scream, Knock at the Cabin. Okay, yeah, Fast and Furious 9 movie collection,
Oh,
debuting at
jeez.
number 20. Wait,
Oh,
9 movie collection. No, that would be all the other movies.
yeah. I could think of so many other things I would rather spend my time on than watching all nine Fast and Furious movies.
Well, for that matter, what occurs to me is that you'd be an idiot to buy that collection now because you're 2 movies away from it being wrapped up.
Yeah,
Just wait 2 years and spend the money then.
yeah. That's um that's what I did with I did that with Harry Potter. I just waited for all the movies to be done and then I bought them all in one set.
Yep. Yep. Now, as far as a little special bonus that came up before the show came out, but works nicely as part of the box office section,
Yes.
Indiana Jones is coming up in a few weeks. And for a movie that cost like 300 plus million to make because of all the reshoots they've had to do on this turkey, it is currently tracking, according to Anthony D'Alessandro over at Deadline Hollywood, for a 60 million domestic opening weekend.
Oh. Oh.
Oh man.
Oh.
Gee, it's like debuting the thing at Cannes a month early was a bad idea.
Yeah.
And
Jeez.
it's kind of fascinating because you like so you know how it's like it's hard to tell the difference between sabotage and incompetence.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, did they actually think this movie was good behind the scenes at Disney Lucasfilm, or did Bob Iger say, "I want this Kathleen jerk gone.
Um
I'm going to do everything I can to make
uh
sure that this movie bombs because it's going to bomb anyway. So just a bigger tax write-off."
yeah. Um to quote Grandpa Simpson, a little from column A, a little from column B.
Possibly. Again, like I don't want to get into libel territory here, but
Yeah.
it's interesting that it's a possibility. Is I guess all I'm
Yeah.
going to say.
Yeah, there could be some office politics going on there.
Yeah, but either way, it's like it's just fell flat at Cannes. So there we go.
Yeah, and having grown up watching the Indiana Jones movies, and you know, I hate seeing that happen to the character. I hate seeing that happen to Harrison Ford. It's not right.
I mean, you're always kind of playing against your last movie, which I think is the problem that Guardians of the Galaxy had early on.
Hmm.
So, and the last movie for this one was way long ago, and it was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I actually enjoyed at the time, but I don't know if I'd want to rewatch it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Yeah, it's yeah, I remember liking it, when I saw it in the theater, and then but then, the more I think about it, it's like, oh, aliens, really?
Yeah. Well, there's that theater hypnosis effect where, at least for me, I tend to enjoy movies I see at the theaters more than movies I see at home.
Yeah. And, well, and two, and also too, it's Indiana Jones, and that was the first Indiana Jones movie I saw in the theater.
Right. That does help with hypnosis.
Yeah.
But oof.
Yeah.
Although this storyline itself actually makes a decent transition to our one news story of the day.
Yes.
So, so as far as go away Yahoo News. See if
Yeah.
I pop out this video, can I make it go away? Okay, it's out of the
Okay. Okay.
it's no
I
longer
yeah,
visible from streaming end.
good. Yeah. I don't want to look at. I don't want to look at the the guy in the White House. I don't.
All right. So I thought this was an interesting little bit of corporate brinksmanship.
Mhm.
Now, before we get into this, I'll just make the disclosure: I do own a small stake in Comcast stock. So make of that what you will as far as any bias I might have.
Yeah, and I will say I don't own any Comcast stock. I used to own Disney stock, but I don't anymore. So but I am annual pass holder at Disney World and Vacation Club. So make of that what you will.
Yep. So, it's so the history of Hulu is kind of interesting. I have a variety of articles here. So back in September of 2022,
Mhm.
actually, no, let's go back even further. No, I had a article that went into the history a bit more. Oh well. Oh, also, I wanted to bring this up at the start of this because this is the one that people are most likely to accidentally stumble across who aren't regular viewers.
Oh yeah.
Um, Comic book great Peter David had a stroke earlier this year. He's possibly my favorite comic book writer of all time, if I actually think about the series I've read over time. And he's still recovering. They're having to do uh, getting his catheter out
Mm,
because he's not been doing great. So if, we'll have the link to this GoFundMe in the final video.
yeah.
So if you can give anything, it would mean a lot for an old man who's brought joy to a lot of people.
Yeah, and if you've got the link right now, you can put it in the chat too.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm just going to pull up YouTube over on this one here. So while we get into that, while I do that,
Yeah.
basically the history of Hulu is that one of the interesting things that Midnight's Edge has brought up is they have discussed the streaming wars less as a uh, less as like a competition between cable channels, which is how people usually see it, and more of a like more of a format war along the lines of like DVD versus. Well, actually, DVD didn't really have a competition, did it? Maybe DivX for a hot minute,
Yeah, maybe.
but okay, Betamax versus VHS
Yeah.
type thing.
Yeah, Blu-ray and HD DVD. Yeah.
Yep.
Did you already say that? No, I wasn't
Nope.
paying attention. Oh,
I managed to avoid that one
okay.
somehow. At the obvious current example.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and I think that it's intriguing because like because they technically kind of had the agreed upon format originally, which was Hulu. Like Hulu, I believe Hulu has been in the past modestly profitable. It's like Hulu, there are a couple of unique shows on there. Like there was some superhero show I used to watch, like an animated one.
Yeah, and yeah, the only two shows that I can think of right now that would be remotely popular would be like Handmaid's Tale
Hmm.
and Only Murders in the Building.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about Only Murders in the Building. That's probably their biggest one. And
Yeah.
Handmaid's Tale, I can't tell if that's actually popular or if it's just popular with people who make the news.
Yeah, yeah. Good point there.
But it was basically a co-owned venture, and apparently Comcast, or I believe Comcast, was partially responsible for this idea, from what
Mhm.
I had read. Um, and it was like a conglomerate of different interests, like Fox, NBC, and so on.
Yeah. Oh, and Hulu has The Bear, but I don't know if that's popular.
I can't say I've heard of that one.
I've heard of it, but I can't tell you what it's about.
Th- They also debuted Prey on there, which we watched last year for the show.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not like it has nothing, but it's not. in that Netflix or even that Mandalorian thing.
Right. Yeah.
But Hulu was mainly there as a way to actually remember this at the time when Hulu was fairly fresh. Bart was making a joke about tune in at 7:30 or tomorrow on Hulu,
Yeah.
and like a season's 20 just Simpson episode that I happened to catch.
Yeah.
Because they used to be ad supported with no you could have it for free. Then it became paywalled with ads or not ads, and the option for live TV. It was basically like the industry's attempt to make a cable alternative.
Yeah. Yeah. They were trying to make it like Sling and
Direct TV, maybe.
yeah, maybe yeah, DirecTV. Yeah.
So I think that is so that where that kind of fell apart was, well, Warner Brothers got out, I believe, at one point.
Mm.
They had been in it, they got out. Disney bought Fox, which upped their stake to 67%. Comcast bought NBC Universal, and I feel like they also bought somebody else who they bought in on.
Yeah. Maybe. I can't think of it.
So
Yeah.
basically went from like a wide-ranging bucket of supporters to two.
Yeah.
And it's basically domestic only. A lot of what we see on Hulu here in the States is available as part of Disney Plus internationally.
Right. Yeah. They do have some anime on there, which is interesting.
One thing I've noticed is that since Sony brought Crunchyroll and Funimation, is that they have been very willing to license that out everywhere because Hulu has anime, Paramount Plus has some anime. There's old anime on services like Pluto and Tubi.
Yeah. Netflix has some anime. Yeah.
Heck, Netflix, you can watch Demon Slayer season 3 on there at the same time as you can watch it on Crunchyroll, which you would think that would be like a golden goose, but I think they'd rather just take the licensing fee than insist on people paying for their niche service.
Yeah.
So, so that's all. Basically, off of that Animu tangent.
Mm.
Um, so Hulu ended up having two buyers, and at the time, Comcast and Disney came up with their deal was that either one of them could, at a certain point, force a sale of the remaining part of the company to Disney.
Mm.
At the time, this probably seemed like a good deal because Hulu was at its peak strength and everyone was trying to get into streaming. And so, yeah, of course, exclusive access and ownership of Hulu sounds like a great idea.
Mm.
Fast forward, and you have some interesting things going on. So first off, 2024 is where we have this. 2024 is early 2024 is where we have this. And this article I pulled up earlier, late last year, September 2022, which is nearly a year ago. And oh my God, where did this year go?
I don't know.
Comcast executives were expecting Disney to stick to its agreement to acquire the remaining stake in Hulu. So this was not a surprise to anybody. Like it's been well telegraphed.
Yeah.
The amount I have heard thrown around for how much Comcast's stake is worth, I believe Bob Iger was trying to softball it at $9 billion. Where Comcast and Disney, according to Yahoo Finance here, via AOL, which is what I just happened to find when I was doing searches for it. So that AOL and Yahoo are owned by the same company at this point, so it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so according to Wall Street Journal, NBC Universal executives estimated Hulu's valuation to be more than $70 billion in 2021.
9 billion, 70 million. That's a pretty big gap there.
Well, so it's slightly less of a gap, but still ginormous because that 9 billion is what Disney was like, or Iger was, as memory serves, talking about them being worth. Which would, if would basically put the company at around 27 to 30 billion or so.
Yeah.
So 70 million. What is a third of 70 billion? Why am I multiplying instead of dividing? I am too used to doing ratios and dividend payment calculations, stuff like that.
Ah.
That would be a $23 billion price tag, which is roughly what that 9 billion amount is what Disney seems to think that the company as a whole is worth
Yeah,
almost.
jeez. Just a small amount of 70 billion. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, just pocket change because after all, Disney's doing great, right?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And it's not like that's what they paid for 20th Century Fox.
No, yeah, that's kind of hilarious that when you, and also Comcast is partially responsible for that 70 billion price tag because they kept also bidding up the cost of Fox when Disney was trying to buy it.
Yeah.
Do,
Oof.
do you feel like Comcast is trying to destroy Disney? Because it feels like they're trying to destroy Disney.
It certainly seems that way, yeah. Or at least cripple it.
Right, because it's, I mean, God, just think about that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, they managed to get, ramp up the cost of Fox tens of billions just by
Yeah.
being about the only media player in town who could realistically buy it.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers was part of AT&T at that point, and that was like the biggest other entertainment player.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly wasn't Viacom. Yeah.
No. Also, it occurs to me that I keep talking about the calculator, so I'm glad I keep reading the numbers off because the way I'm sharing the screen, it isn't actually visible on the audience's end.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should say anything about it or not. I'm sorry.
If I do something stupid, please let me know.
Okay. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
Okay.
So,
Mm.
um, Comcast reportedly weighed purchasing Disney's majority stake at one point, but changed course due to content rights concerns as a significant portion of Hulu's content is owned by Disney. Yeah, that's the other thing is that all the Fox and Disney stuff on there, like Prey, they would have
Mhm.
to pay. They would not only have to pay 23 billion. How much is the two-thirds stake worth? If Comcast thinks it's worth it, yeah, 46 billion to then get to pay Disney for licensing rights forever to keep the same amount of content.
Wow.
So it's yeah, as like I was saying, we have a significant disagreement in the cost here,
Yeah.
and I decided to do a little bit of research because we I believe we talked about last year Netflix's major stock crash, and realized that I hadn't actually looked up to see how it was doing since then. So I took a few screenshots. Let's see here. So let's compare some peers here.
Okay.
So if you had bought Netflix at its trough last year when they actually lost subscribers and everybody panicked at the same time, uh,
Yeah.
if you'd managed to buy it at the exact right moment, $164.28 per share is now kissing 400.
Wow.
That doubled your money in a year.
Wow.
Um, If we take a look at Comcast themselves, which Comcast is actually harder to compare because most of their money comes from their cable business.
Right.
That was actually an amusing thing when I was watching the Valiant Renegade live stream about the Comcast shareholder thing. Was that none of the Wall Street analysts actually asked interesting questions about Mario Brothers or other things like that. It was all about the cable business, phone business, cable business, phone business, international TV business.
Okay.
Because that's not where their bread and butter is.
Right. Yeah.
But from a similar trough, which I think it looks like it was around the same time as the Netflix sell-off,
Mm.
uh, you wouldn't have doubled your money, but maybe 50% higher at the peak, 33 to 50% higher.
Mm.
So okay, so there was a bit of a panic last year, but all these media companies seem to have recovered, right? Oh,
Oh, yeah. And now you know why I don't own Disney stock anymore.
yeah. It's been on a downturn for a bit. And it keeps going down. Although they did manage to actually, are they still out of the 90s? Let's find out. Or out of the 80s, I should say. Disney stock at 92.53. So it recovered a bit from the most recent dump where everybody was panicking. But the thing that I've heard people talk about is how Disney supposedly has no money sitting around. Like I've heard of Valiant Renegades of the accountants on there saying 200 million
Yeah.
on hand, but I didn't want to just take that at face value, so I decided to look up Disney's annual stock report for 2022 and just see what all they had. Their quarter and their fiscal year ended like last in April, I believe.
Okay.
So, in terms of on-hand cash, and on April 2nd of 2022, they reported cash equivalents, and restricted cash end of period 13 billion versus 10 billion. So their on-hand reserves have gone down some,
Uh,
which means that if they were to buy up that Comcast stake, they better hope it's that $9 billion amount. Because by all indications, the options are either to borrow it at higher interest rates, um, give Comcast a large chunk of Disney stock, or some combination of the two.
oof.
Mexican Iron Man was actually talking about how if they were to do that full amount in Disney stock, it would make Comcast their biggest shareholder with more like a 14% stake at current stock prices,
Oh.
which might actually be illegal.
Oh, okay.
He didn't speculate that. I'm thinking, well, I recall when Elon Musk was trying to buy up Twitter, he was playing games with staying under that 10% threshold at first.
Right, yeah.
Because like once you hit a certain ownership percentage, you got to start disclosing, and you suddenly become very visible.
Yeah.
And that might actually be an antitrust concern if Comcast owned too much of Disney, considering everything else they own.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So my overall conclusion here is that, again, if Comcast hasn't been trying to destroy or cripple Disney on purpose, they've been doing a good job of it accidentally, because they keep making Disney overspend for things that they shouldn't have spent for in the first place.
Yeah.
Like a $9 billion payday for their share of Hulu would basically that would fund a lot of Universal Studios expansion in Florida.
Yes, it would. Yeah.
They're also working on one in Texas, of all things.
Hmm. Oh, that makes sense because it's a good climate. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, barring the occasional random snowstorm, but
Oh, yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So that's basically what I've distilled from reading up on financial documents, looking up articles, listening to um, Mexican Iron Man and Valiant Renegades speak on it.
Okay.
It's going to be a very interesting situation to follow, just because, again, this is why Dave Ramsey says to have 6 months of expenses on hand at any time. They basically it's the equivalent of not having an e fund.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, it just seems like Disney has been they have not been making sound business decisions, and of course the guy that's been making in charge of those decisions is Bob Iger, who
Yep,
you know
the once and future CEO.
yes, it's yeah.
So it's just a fascinating, very elaborate story that is going to be fun to watch unfold and see if Disney is able to. Oh, yeah, the other thing is that at the time it was seen as a good deal to make both sides able to force the sale, because it's like, oh yeah, of course we're going to want all of Hulu. Oh, yeah, of course we're going to want to sell our stake in Hulu. But boy, in retrospect,
Yeah, not such a good
it
idea.
should have made it so that it had to be a meeting of the minds.
Yeah.
So now we're going to get into our discussion topic. I will be right back.
Okay.
So, Daniel, entertain the people.
Okay.
Put on a show or something. I don't know. It's up to you.
All right. Well, let's see. Let me think. Okay. A I got nothing, folks. Here. I could just play a bunch of clips here. well, okay. I will say this. I guess I could do a little promotion. Guardian Angel is, of course, still on in demand on Indiegogo. Link is in the description down below, and of course, DB's books are down below as well. Links to those. Um, if you didn't see the updates on the campaign page, uh, we've got Bogdan has 8 pages left to draw in color, so we're getting it's getting close to being done, at least drawn and colored anyway. And then once that's done, it'll go into the lettering, and then after lettering, it's on to production. So I don't know if it'll make the August deadline or not, but obviously I'll keep everybody apprised of it. Um, and of course, and if I hadn't mentioned this before, part two is the script for that is done. So once part one gets through, or gets done, production and drawn and everything, um, Bogdan and I will move right into part two. So yeah, and so yeah, the fun times there. Chinggis, here, got your question here. If Disney goes kaput, what'll happen to all the stuff they bought? Um, I don't see Disney necessarily going kaput. They would probably sell off a lot of stuff before that happened, or they would from us, the taxpayer, which um, you know that I wouldn't want that at all. Um,
That financial situation does kind of add a little bit of credence to that rumor that George Lucas offered to buy Star Wars back from Disney.
yeah,
A little bit of credence. I don't tend to actually think it's too realistic, but
yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think a lot of that's probably wishful thinking.
yeah, yeah, it's basically wishful thinking on the level of no, guys, seriously, they're gonna decanonize the sequel trilogy. Just you watch.
Yeah, yeah,
It occurs to me that we're kind of seeing what that would look like in the public eye with the Flash, because that was originally made to decanonize the Snyderverse, more or less,
yeah,
and just how
yeah.
much interest there is in it.
Hmm. Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there.
Hmm.
So, boy, that actually took longer to discuss than I was expecting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we kind of went off on a couple of tangents there.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, Daniel, I think it would be fair to say that we're a couple of nerds.
Yes.
And we're nerds who have like very particular, or who have franchises that have been with us since we were children, if so, or since our teens.
Yeah.
But also in that time, there have been plenty of TV shows and movies and things where we enjoyed them, but we didn't like stick around with them.
Yeah.
So, so the thought today was, let's kind of talk about what our forever franchises are and what we think about them that might have been like what made them like put the meat hooks deep in us.
Yeah. So, should I start or?
Go ahead. I've been blabbing
Okay.
enough.
Um, well, the first franchise that comes to my mind is Star Trek.
Knew it. Should have put money on it.
Yeah, so I mean I've been watching Star Trek since I was very young, like three or 4 years old.
Mhm.
Um, got into it with the movies, and then started watching the old television series, and then right around that time was when the Next Generation premiered on TV,
Mhm.
and I think I think what drew me into that drew me into it was just when I was really little, it's probably the colorful characters,
Hmm.
and just the adventure aspect of it.
I mean, why am I still having you on the secondary monitor? Back on the primary monitor, so I
Uh,
can actually look at you in the eye rather than. Like, that's one thing I noticed when I watch the show afterwards is that I look like I'm disinterested. No, I'm looking right at Daniel. Just Daniel's on my screen over here.
yeah. No, you're not like Johnny Carson, who's always looking around. um, but yeah, and I think it was just especially the original TV show was fun. It had a yeah, Chingus, shut up, Wesley. I swear, if I ever see Will Wheaton in person, I'm going to say that to him.
Oh, I'm sure that he's. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, but and then I think, and I stuck with it as I got older because of the storytelling, because of the characters, and and especially the universe expanded, when they started expanding it, not just with TNG, but with DS9. Less so with Voyager. I wasn't really a fan of Voyager. Um, but then with Enterprise, I just I enjoyed the not so much the cultural commentary that they would do, although
Mhm.
that was I didn't mind that. I some of that
That's
was
in
good.
Star Trek's DNA too.
Yeah, it is. But for me, it was always the adventure aspect of it, and the boldly going where no man has gone before.
It occurs to me that so I would say, would it be fair to say that we've had two Star Trek series that have really stuck in the public consciousness? Like
Uh,
it's not like they're like Paramount Plus is chomping at the bit to make Star Trek Janeway.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Well, I mean, which one are you referring? Which two are you referring to?
Original and the Next Generation.
Okay. Yeah, I would. Yeah, those were probably the two most well known series.
Also noteworthy that Seven of Nine is the one they brought into Picard because
Yeah,
that was the
yeah,
one anybody remembered from Voyager. Most likely for okay, so it's like a prurient reasons that she would stick in people's minds, but also like the most interesting character on that show.
right. Yeah. Um, and although I will say, DS9 got a bit of a surge in popularity in the last few years, especially when it was on Netflix. People were actually going back to that, even although I liked it from the very beginning.
You, yes, yes, Mr. Hipster. We know you lived in Austin for a bit. The virus
Yeah,
is in you.
yes, yes, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Deep
uh,
Space. Yeah, Nolan Ninja says Deep Space Nine is the third. Yeah, it's the bronze medal for series popularity.
yeah. I would agree with that. And yeah, they're not there. Yeah, there isn't a lot of chopping at the bit for Star Trek Janeway or Star Trek Archer, or
Star Trek Bakula.
Star Trek Bakula. Yeah,
Um, yeah. Now, I think part of that could be, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, I know that I used to watch Voyager and what I watched of Enterprise on UPN,
hmm,
which was Paramount's attempt at a network that was always miserable failure.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas I remember DS9 was on Fox where I was at.
DS9. So TNG and DS9 were both sold into first run syndication.
Right. That's what I mean. Like they were widely available,
Right.
while Voy is that almost like an early version of the streaming wars, where you take something that's popular because everyone can access it no matter where they are in the country. And boy, if you don't have UPN or have an interest in watching UPN, you're not going to stumble across those two Star Trek shows.
Yeah, yeah. And those two shows, well, as Voyager especially, that was the flagship show for that network.
Yep.
Yeah.
It also occurs to me that so So speaking as like somebody who I know Star Trek, but I'm like a not lukewarm because I usually enjoy it when I watch it, but it's not something I seek out. It's
Hmm.
it's like a step above pineapple on pizza to me. By which I mean I am at this point mostly neutral to pineapple on pizza. I've learned to
Hmm.
tolerate it, but I wouldn't order it for myself. But if somebody like that's all that was there, I was like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
It is like several. It is like it is steps above that. If somebody provided it to me, I will watch it, but I don't go seeking it out myself.
Right. Yeah.
But what I remember from watching it as a kid is that I always liked Next Generation had Mr. Worf and Data, who were both very easy characters to understand and latch onto.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I would say they were probably the two most popular on the show.
And of course, Geordi was the Reading Rainbow guy. So as a kid, I liked that fact.
Yeah. Yeah, that was always funny when I was a kid in school and we'd watch Reading Rainbow and he would come on. I'd be like, "It's Jordy." Oh, you
Damn it! Sorry, my screen went completely black there for a second. So
Oh, okay.
um, let's see, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, so it occurs to me, and of course, with the original series, you had the holy trinity of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy.
Hmm.
There does seem to be something about having like a main three that seems to help. Where like, from what I've seen of DS9, would it be say it's more of like an ensemble show.
Oh yeah,
Like there
yeah.
isn't like there aren't three main characters, for lack of a better term, that I can think of.
No, it was no. You're right. It was very much an ensemble cast, and a diverse one too.
No, Daniel, diversity didn't exist until 2015. That
Oh, right. Of course, I forgot. It didn't exist in 1993.
absolutely not. Um, and I think they kind of tried to do that again and it actually Voyager was also kind of more of an ensemble.
Hmm.
Maybe they pretended that no, it was more of an ensemble because while Neelix was the Jar Jar Binks of Star Trek, he wasn't like he wasn't as super important as Spock or McCoy or Data or
Yeah, he was kind of the mascot of the show.
yeah, for worse and worse.
Yeah.
I think they tried to get back into having a main three in Enterprise with Bakula, T'Pol, and Tucker.
Tucker. Yeah. Trip. Yeah.
Trip, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or 1966. Yeah.
So that, so yes, I think that one of the things we find there is that it can be helpful to have the wider audience appreciate you, to
Hmm.
have like, you kind of know who the main three are,
Right.
or you know who your main cast is. And they're like, you have beloved secondary characters who fill in things like, say, Mr. Scott.
Mm.
We do want to bet that he was some kid's introduction to the Scottish accent.
Probably. Yeah. And yeah, the same with Chekhov and the Russian accent.
Nuclear Wessels.
Clear whistle.
Um, now, were you into like the larger Star Trek stuff? Like, were you like? I know they've had novels and the odd video game, and
I didn't really read very many of the novels, but I definitely played a lot of the video games.
so I've not really heard much about them. Which one would you say is like was your favorite?
Um, well, I would say I had a couple. I really liked. God, what was it? It was a puzzle game. It was kind of like Myst. I can't remember the
Hmm.
name of it. Um,
It's like a early CGI puzzle game.
right, yeah, and it had the draw with that game was that the entire cast from the show was in that from TNG was in that
Hmm.
game. I believe it or not, I really like the Elite Force games.
Oh,
Uh,
those Doom-ish games or
yeah,
Quake-ish games.
yeah, they were FPS games. Yeah, the first one I think was the Doom 3 engine, and I don't know about the second one. I actually like the second one better than the first one because the second one you were on the Enterprise E instead of on the Voyager.
An immediate step up.
Yes.
So, so it sounds like having secondary media available to hit your interests was like a key part of, it gives you something to do while you wait for new episodes.
Right. Yeah. And I had all the action figures too, and I had all the toys and everything. So
Yeah, it's like, so Star Trek is different than, so being a TV show. Star Trek is a bit different than, say, Star Wars, and
mhm,
so I think that's a mutual one for both of us.
yeah.
Because like even when there were six movies, as there were by the time I was a young adult, it's not like you would necessarily watch them over and over and over again. But at that
Right.
time, there was like constant Star Wars video game releases.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you had like Shadows of the Empire, you had uh the Dark Forces.
Hmm.
Yeah.
My screen went out again, but I think it's just my monitor's misbehaving.
Oh, okay.
So if I suddenly cut out and the show ends, that's why.
Yeah, you got yeah. Um yeah, and then trying to think what was the I'm trying to think of another game, but yeah, like there was a barrage of them, like all the yeah, the Starfighter. Thank you, Ninja.
Yeah,
The
oh, man,
Starfighter
those
game.
TIE Fighter and X-wing games, those are
Right,
my
yeah.
jam.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Um, let's see. Um, so for Star Wars, I definitely was into the novels, and arguably I was a bigger fan of the novels than the actual movies themselves, just
Mm,
because I spent so much more time reading them because they were available.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
for me with Star Wars, I mean, I've seen the movies like a bunch of times, and I can't say I was really that much into the novels. I couldn't really. Yeah, and the problem I have with Star Wars, I love Star Wars. Don't get me wrong. But but like you, I kind of like not as big. Kind of the way you were with Star Trek, not as big of a, not as into it.
mhm.
Um, because I really like. I mean, if you ask me, like the Star Trek races, all the different races, like I could probably tell you, like I could tell you like a bunch of them. If you ask me to name like a whole bunch of Star Wars ones, I'll be like, ah,
Oh, you like Star Wars, huh? Name every star.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, where like with the Star Wars novels, they did a decent job of, fleshing out the universe. There are also comics you could read, and of course the toys. Had to have the toys.
Oh yeah. The toys sold uh, gross more or had higher revenue than the movies, or twice as much. Yeah, twice as much as the movies.
Right. Of course, it's the unfair thing where the movies you just sell them to, you're just selling them to TV or on VHS or whatever at the time. But the
Yeah.
toys, yeah, if you want a whole set of them, you're dropping a couple hundred.
Oh yeah.
Especially because for those '90s toys, they were, as I understand, just redos, like mild redos of the '70s molds they already had, '70s '80s molds they already had. Which
Yeah.
that's boy, that's to get to sell a toy twice. That's the dream
Uh,
for Hasbro or Kenner or whoever. No, Kenner.
Yeah. Yeah. Kenner, and then Kenner, then Hasbro. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that so I think that for like the things that really sink into you, it's a world where like there's like a lot of detail for you to absorb. But did you ever have any of the Star Trek manuals or like technical readouts or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was me with Star Wars. Like I know stupid amounts of details about some of the warships from the Star Wars novels, because and the actual movies too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know what a skip ray blast boat is. No one should know what a skip ray blast boat is. Also, if anybody makes a comment, my screens have gone completely dead now, so I don't know what's going on here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, both my monitors are dead. So either the HDMI feeds on my laptop have failed, or something is wrong with my power supply.
Oh, well,
S-
you're still coming through. We can still hear
Okay.
you and see you. So
Okay, so that makes sense. The camera is still lit up here, but if
yeah.
somebody says something to me in the chat and I don't respond, that's why. I'm
Okay.
completely flying blind here.
I'll say something if yeah anything comes up.
Uh, but yeah, so it's like it's interesting where people are. It's kind of like you as a writer, you get to double dip because you have to make up these details so that the universe is consistent as you're writing it. But if it becomes popular and you can you know, come out with a technical manual that has all the details you've assembled, that's free money.
Oh yeah, yeah. And Changa says, "I oh, you know your Star Wars stuff. Then tell me, what is Jar Jar Binks's real Sith identity?"
Jar Jar Binks did nothing wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, he, he was only following orders there.
yes,
Always two there are.
yes.
Always two says there is.
Oh yes, oh yes, sir. Uh,
Um, the other one is I think there's like something about the nerd psychology where once you decide you like something, you want to know every single thing possible about it.
yeah.
Like I remember, so there was like a detail about uh, so I've talked recent weeks a lot about BattleTech and MechWarrior, because a friend of mine online happened to bring it up to me, so I've been getting back into it, which is part of what inspired my last couple of things of the week there.
Mm,
And the BattleTech universe, okay, so like Star Wars and Star Trek, I would say like they're kind of original creations. Like there's references in them, but they aren't. There's not a lot of okay expanded universe Star Wars. There's some goofy stuff in there, but the actual like primary media is usually pretty takes itself mostly seriously, right?
right. Yeah.
Star Wars Holiday Special being an early exception.
Yeah.
BattleTech as a universe has always not been afraid to have stupid references all over the
Mm.
place. Like there was a planet called Lum after the alien from Urusei Yatsura. Um, they had minor states that were just the Umayyad Caliphate, but in space, and literally just called the Umayyad Caliphate a real life Spanish kingdom. Yeah, I believe Spanish Muslim kingdom.
Yeah.
Um, but like the thing with BattleTech is that since it was a board game slash video game series where you would have literally hundreds of mech and vehicle designs, they got very they occasionally let themselves get kind of crazy with the lore for some of these things. Um,
Yeah.
one of my favorite ones that I remember was that for a particular type of tank, uh, so tanks you have to like control the tension of the treads,
Mm,
or else things break down because tank tread is a bunch of wheels that are keeping a thing moving around them. So you have to have like
right.
just the right tension.
Yeah.
And for the particular model of tank, somebody had noticed that Faro Beer's unique pyramidal beer can was the perfect size to measure the the track tension, but only if it was a fresh can.
Yeah.
So, Alicorn crews are always very enthusiastic about carrying out maintenance.
Yeah.
Like,
Uh,
there's no like that's never going to come up in a novel or a video game, but that detail is there. So multiply that by hundreds, and yeah, it's like even if you don't like, I would buy technical readouts and come to the end of it and conclude, I don't really like most of these mechs, but the lore is interesting.
yeah. I think what's another kind of going back to the point of like knowing, wanting to know everything. I think these franchises, what they do is they inspire us.
Hmm.
They inspire our imagination. They inspire our creativity. Um, and the characters in the franchise are inspirational as well.
Mhm.
We whether it, we look at characters like Luke Skywalker, like James T. Kirk, or uh, uh, pick whatever, pick any Star Trek or Star Wars character that you like, or any from any franchise, and we kind of we admire them, and we want to you know we might even fantasize about being them. It's kind of, it's just,
Mhm.
it's a it kind of brings out the child in us, basically.
Yeah, and like, what kid could watch Spider-Man swinging around the city and not imagine what that would be like?
Oh yeah.
Spider-Man might be, as far as like superhero movement styles go, might be the most unique of them all because up until then, you either were driving around in a mobile or you were or you were flying, right, or had
Right. Yeah.
some sort of invisible plane.
Yeah.
But Spider-Man's unique. The whole
Yeah.
web swinging thing. It's like that's I would have loved to hear Stan Lee and Steve Ditko hashing that out.
Yeah. Like, well, how does he move around? Well, he swings around on a web through the buildings. Oh,
Okay, but what
that's
happens when, aren't there going to be huge streams of web all over the place? It dissolves after an hour. Shut up.
yeah.
So I think that like for our franchise we're discussing here, it's like it sparks the imagination, but there's also a way for you to participate with it.
Right.
Because like every series we've mentioned here, there was not only like the primary media, but there's also video games, novels, spin-off comics. In the case of BattleTech, a board game.
Yeah.
It's like there are ways for you to fill your time with it in between waiting for major releases,
Yeah.
whatever the primary media happened to be.
Yeah. And Ninja says, Rim, it's Spider-Man, late '80s, X-Men, and the New Mutants were my teen fandom that stuck with me to adulthood, and Moon Knight as well.
Yeah, X-Men, man.
Yeah.
Like you want to talk about a series that that was all consuming for me. When I was in 1994, my mom actually was willing to make a Wolverine cake to celebrate his 30th birthday. No, no, 20th birthday at the
Sorry.
time.
All right.
Like Wolverine was my guy
Oh yeah.
when I was a kid.
Yeah. I liked them too. Yeah.
It's like, while X Men is that ensemble cast, I think that you could argue that Wolverine was the main character of X Men in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah. Especially the animated series. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like yeah, there's just something about like, it, and looking back on it, did you ever have any of those Scholastic X Men books, like the ones where they were basically retelling comic stories from like 5, 10 years earlier?
I might have. I can't remember.
I am kind of amazed in retrospect how close they were allowed to be to the original comics.
Hmm.
Like, because they were just novelettes, but like, are you familiar with the story of Soren and Mariko? Not Soren and Mariko, excuse me. It's known of Logan and Mariko, where like her dad was a crime boss, and he had to
Yeah.
learn the way of the samurai to become worthy of her.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. Was it with the Silver Samurai?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
her brother.
Yeah.
You know, sidebar. Everyone says that nobody comes or everybody comes back in comics. Mariko, they've been surprisingly willing to stay dead and unexplored.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But that's either here nor there. Um, so they were. I guess that's another way they get the meat hooks into is that those Scholastic book sales, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's like you just take your medium and you just adapt it into as many, or you take your content and put in as many media as possible. Because if you just have somebody who, I'll pick up the occasional issue of X-Men, that's there for them. But if it's something that gets its hooks into you and you just keep on going with it, like as as long as there's something to consume, you'll consume it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah. And That might actually be a pretty good lesson for the two of us with our own franchises.
Yep.
As soon
Although
as
it's
we get
harder to come up with that constant treadmill when it's just the two of us,
that's true. Yeah.
but having multiple ways for somebody to like you is always helpful.
Yes.
Now, are there series that you used to be huge into that just for whatever reason have lost you? We'll leave Star Wars off the table because we have talked that one to death.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. The only one I could probably think of, um, is probably the Halo franchise.
Yeah, Halo I want to keep liking, but I actually didn't even mind Halo 5 as much as other people did. But there's a phenomenon where it's like, where a story doesn't feel real anymore.
Yeah.
As soon as I feel like as soon as you've lost that with the audience, like as soon as the story is like, okay, soup's done, or yeah, toast me, soup, or check please, check please.
Check. Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking soup's on for some reason, but check please.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you have that check please moment with the franchise, it's very hard to come back.
Yeah. I hate to say it. I kind of had that with Halo. It was probably Halo 4.
Yeah, Halo 4, stupid snipers. The, the Halo campaigns with and their bullshit jackal snipers have just been
Yeah.
it,
And they're invincible too. It seems like no matter how many times you shoot them, nothing
yeah, they just
happens.
gotta rock back a little bit.
Yeah. It's like, God.
I'm gonna stop trying to make you angry.
Okay. Okay.
I can't see you right now because my screen's black, but I can feel the annoyance coming through my headphones.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I think the other one that I could think of where I was kind of big into it for a little bit, but then it lost me was Ruby.
Mm, yeah.
Although I think that the problem with Ruby, like so Ruby had a number of so at the time. Okay, so one of my things was that just from what I thought of the characters and their preferred relationships, like I don't want to say like I was shipping anybody, but I had a very strong non-ship. Like,
Uh,
don't get these two characters together. It's stupid. Don't do it. And season 6, I got the spoiler that they did it. Right around the same time that Kick Vic happened, and they replaced him on the character of Crow, who was like my favorite, probably because he was Wolverine-ish, as far as Ruby would let you be.
yeah.
And so it's like at that moment, it's just like, well, I tried to watch an episode, and you ever have a hard time like this is entertaining, this is supposed to be entertaining,
Hmm.
but it feels like it's just dull and slow, and you can't be bothered.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that lack of magic.
Yeah, and that tends to happen with, especially with a TV show that's been on for a long time.
Yeah, like it's definitely like the Simpsons has gotten, as an example of a long running TV show, The Simpsons has gotten better in the last couple seasons than it's been, but it's not. It's more like it's good because of drama, not because of quotable, funny moments.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and Ninja says channel awesome for him.
Oh
Reasons that I'm no longer a fan is that I grew up.
yeah, yeah. There are series that just there are things that just don't follow you, right?
Yeah.
Like Ninja Turtles. I would say like Ninja Turtles. I haven't been super invested in like 20-ish years at this point.
Hmm.
But it's not like I had like a moment of blow up where I was like, you know what, f you guys, you destroyed the franchise. I want out. It was
Yeah.
more just like I grew up and discovered more complex media.
Yeah. Yeah. Ninja Turtles is one that I would say I kind of go the way the franchise goes, where it's like it goes up, up, and then it kind of peters out. and then it kind of has this roller coaster thing. That's kind of the way I am with it. I'll get into it for a while, and then I'll fall out of it, and then I'll get into it and fall out of it. And yeah,
So long troughs in between.
right, yeah,
Have you
and
read that comic book they came out with,
oh, I
Ronin?
got that. Yeah,
I have it. I haven't read it yet though, and I need to.
the Last Ronin.
Last Ronin, yeah.
You're gonna be surprised at who the Last Ronin is.
I've unfortunately had it spoiled.
Oh, okay.
But to be fair, when I heard who it was, I was like, of course, that's who you'd have be the last guy. It'd be too obvious for it to be the one. It'd be too obvious for it to be the other.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm speaking in vague here.
yes,
So it's like there are really only two options if you wanted it to be interesting.
right, yeah. And Changus asks you, you don't like Cat Girl and Blonde Girl?
Yeah, that was the one. I basically, I always thought that was like an awful relationship. And it's also like, why did they bother having the character of Sun exist if he wasn't Blake's love interest?
uh,
Um, and for that matter, the what poor Sun just or yeah, poor Sun just followed her around like a little puppy for 2 seasons.
ugh, uh,
The like I really thought about it. If I would actually would have been more interested in okay if they'd paired up Weiss with Yang.
uh,
Like just because that would have been more of like a contrast because Blake really doesn't have a personality when you get down to it. Her personality is she can't go anywhere without people falling in love with her. She has had at least as of like the first 5 6 seasons that I actually bothered to watch, 4 different characters were interested in her.
oh, jeez. Oh, man.
Counting Yang. So it's like 2 guys, 2 girls. It's like
Well,
does she just have harem energy? I don't know.
maybe, yeah.
Oh, although speaking of lesbians, the other series that really just lost me all at once, even though it didn't have a narrative, was Overwatch.
Oh, yeah.
Partially because it felt like there should have been a more interesting universe there, but there just wasn't.
Yeah, that's a wasted potential.
Right? Like, where's the Netflix show? League of Legends got a Netflix show.
Yeah.
The moment where that broke me, I'd been kind of falling behind on the game for a while. Like my friends were still playing it, but I'd kind of gotten out. Um, was the moment they introduced the hamster.
The hamster.
Look him up. I would if I had access to my screen right now.
Okay. Alright,
Like he does not match the rest of that universe. He is a mutant hamster and a giant roly ball robot.
okay. Oh, what?
And that was the exact moment where I would, okay, this is not a real series.
This is like it's like Scrappy Doo.
Yeah. And so just like I'm out. No, sorry, not interested anymore. Okay, I remember I even tried to read the comic books and they always felt fake.
Yeah.
I think that the feeling of fakeness is you can almost tell when something like nothing interesting is going to be allowed to happen in a story. Because if something interesting happened in a story, that would, have impacts on the lore, and they got to keep the lore ready for when they eventually want to do something with it.
Yeah.
Which 7 years on,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and Ninja brings up a great point. Overwatch should have had a story mode from the get go.
yeah, instead of canceling on Overwatch 2, which boy, that's a blow.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Considering that was the stated reason for canceling Overwatch 1 in favor of Overwatch 2.
Oh yeah.
Daniel, were you super familiar with that one?
Not really. No.
Okay, so the funny thing to me about Overwatch is that in retrospect, they accidentally should have basically every time they did a story event, like they would have a mission that you could play for a couple of weeks that was like, oh, here's the flashback to Tracer's first mission fighting these robots, and oh, it's a flashback to Reaper's days in the Black Watch or whatever they were called.
Uh,
And what occurs to me in retrospect is that okay, if all the interesting stuff is set in the past, why is your story set in the quote unquote present?
Yeah.
Because the backstory of Overwatch is basically a superhero team that has to fight robots who are trying to conquer the Earth, like a race of Reploids or whatever,
Mm.
Omnics, I think they called them, who tried to conquer the world. And in the course of that war, like Reaper got almost killed, and he got turned into a shadow monster by Mercy trying to keep him alive, and so he became the Magneto of the series.
Huh.
Um, so let me ask you this: what would be to stop them from? You don't have villains initially, like, or maybe you have make some omnic villains to people for people to play as. Set it, in the past where all the story ideas you have, and let them unfold over time. Like that would be a fun little status quo change where, like, suddenly all Reaper's like base character design changes. Like,
Yeah.
if you bought the skin, then you can still use the classic skin, but like now when you look at Reaper, he's now the shadow monster instead of being the special forces operative.
Yeah. Mm.
But that's the that might be like the greatest. And I actually noticed that I fell out of love with Overwatch at the same time I fell out of love with Ruby. So I don't know if that was just me finally growing up in some way, or a random coincidence.
Probably a random coincidence.
Yeah. The other problem with Ruby is that they went from it being something where you could watch the entire season in one night as a movie. I actually went to a theater with a friend once to watch season one,
Uh,
and there were like a couple dozen people around. Some of them were in cosplay, so it was fun.
yeah.
Um, to the episodes became like not quite like it basically became like watching a real anime season. And suddenly, when it's investing your time and asking you to watch weekly like a real anime season, and if you're like me and watching on Crunchyroll, you go, why aren't I just watching an actual anime that's good?
Uh, yeah.
So I think that our, as I said, I think that some of the commonalities we're coming across here, sparks your imagination,
Hmm.
and it's like things that you can participate in somehow.
Right. Yeah, and you've got a lot of secondary sources that where you can really invest yourself into the lore of the franchise and get to know the characters. You get to know the different dynamics. If it's a sci-fi series, the different races and the ships and all that stuff.
Yep. And then like once the spell is broken, it seems like the spell is just broken.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I don't acknowledge what you're doing as canon anymore. Whatever.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, to sum it up, yeah, I think a good franchise, like we said, it sparks the imagination, it's inspirational, it catches your attention, captures your imagination, and um, a good franchise will find a way to keep that going, um, through through over a very long period of time.
Right. Which some of them are built for it, some of them aren't.
Yeah.
Like, oh, actually, so interesting thing about Ninja Turtles that I came up in a video I was watching. So, Daniel, would you say that your favorite parts of Ninja Turtles are like where it's like the street level stuff against Shredder and the Foot Clan, maybe like the '80s cartoon stuff where it was like that was the status quo was. Um, Actually, no, I think that for a lot of adult Ninja Turtles fans I talk to, or people who remember it fondly, like basically what the first Ninja Turtles movie was is like their ideal Ninja Turtles.
I would say so. Yeah.
And yet, going back to the comics, they always go into the cosmic stuff, which always seems to lose people whenever they do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. Yeah. That part of it was kind of freaky. And also the time travel stuff.
Yeah, like it was a review series on the 2003 show, and it's like as soon as they had, they had the time travel season and they had the Triceraton invasion. It just sounds like the popularity slipped because what people kind of want from the series is that, sort of Batman Daredevil grade stuff just with giant anthropomorphic turtles.
Right. Yeah.
That may be part of why when we did our trailer review that we were as positive on the movie as we were once we knew more about it,
Yeah.
because it's playing in that zone.
Yeah, I would say that's very true, and it's yeah it's more with Batman, Daredevil, and with the but with the anthropomorphic turtles and other mutants. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, maybe sometimes maybe you just have, maybe your series is just it has a limited shelf appeal and attempts to keep it going are just gonna, yeah, be like introducing the Great Gazoo to the Simpsons or to
Right.
the
Yeah.
Flintstones.
Plus, yeah. And yeah, Ninja says TMNT is a franchise that manages to keep successfully rebranding itself.
That's the other thing is that Ninja Turtles doesn't necessarily follow you as you age. It's just it's always willing to. Okay, it's been 5 or 10 years. Time to get the next group of 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
Last
Well,
Ronin being like the only adult one I can think of that they've come out with.
yeah, that sounds about right. Well,
Uh, Well, that was interesting because
yeah.
it was kind of similar to what I was suspecting would be the answer, but um, well, I've learned from among other things that there are way more Star Trek games than I was aware of.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think we've exhausted this topic.
Yes,
Longest show ever.
I don't know. That time we did the entire 2023 upcoming movie launch or bracket might have been longer.
Oh, maybe. Well, maybe I don't know. Well, we're right at 2 hours, so I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Well, all everyone who watched, thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yeah. Thank you very much. We appreciate it as always. Leave a like, hit the subscribe button, and ring the bell for notifications. If you're watching on replay, leave a comment, and we'll see you all next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.